What's going on, Arc Junkies? Today's guest is Terry Dussault, owner and operator of Yellowknife Consulting Services. Terry's been in the construction safety industry for over 25 years. When most people think about safety, they think it's a barrier to production, that it slows things down and it gets in the way of getting the job done. But that couldn't be further from the truth. The fact of the matter is that proper training and implementation of safety systems increases productivity. Think about it. What's going to take more time? Identifying potential hazards in the workplace and eliminating or mitigating those hazards, or dealing with a lost time injury or loss of life due to lack of proper safety. In this episode, Terry breaks down some of the main reasons we want to implement safety systems in our shop and on the construction site. We'll get right into the episode after a quick word from our supporters. Today's episode of the Arc Junkies Podcast is brought to you by CK Worldwide. Let's take a moment and talk about power and precision with CK Worldwide's MT375 AC/DC. This machine is a welder's dream. With a crisp arc start at just 5 amps, it handles delicate thin metals and goes all the way up to half-inch thick material. But the MT375 is more than just power. It's the complete package, featuring their new dual pump water cooler, keeping your torch cooler for longer, the steady grip foot pedal, which is a total game changer, allowing you to flip between foot pedal and fingertip control for those out-of-position welds. And it comes loaded with a 350 amp flex neck torch, a gas saver kit, and all the accessories you need. Just add coolant and gas. The MT375 is backed by CK Worldwide's 3-year warranty. For more information, visit ckworldwide.com or contact their wonderful customer service team to set up a demo. CK Worldwide, the standard in TIG welding. We're also brought to you by Rockmount Research and Alloys. Do you make repairs on a daily basis? Are you a maintenance welder, a shop welder, a mobile welder, a heavy equipment technician, or the company's go-to welder for everything that breaks? Then you need to check out Rockmount Research and Alloys. They have a solution for every repair when it comes to welding. Most of us rely on 70S6, 7018, or 6013 to fix the majority of broken equipment we run into. But there's a better option out there, and that option is Rockmount. With over 50 years developing tried and true electrodes for the maintenance welding industry and heavy equipment industry, there's not much out there that Rockmount can't help you fix. Give my friends at Rockmount a call at 1-800-272-7637 and talk to one of their specialists and tell them the Arc Junkie sent you. Already know which electrodes or wire you need? Head on over to rockmountwelding.com and place your order directly, and if you spend over $250, you can get a free 1-pound tube of Tartan AAA when you use code word AJP in the discount box at checkout. Weld stronger so your repairs can last longer with Rockmount. We're also brought to you by Fronius USA. They recently released 2 new welding products to unleash your full welding potential. First up is the Fronius Dual Wire Feed. The new WF25i gives welders the freedom to have 2 torches ready to go, each for different wire types or sizes, different welding parameters, and easily switchable at the touch of a button. No need to change wire spools or consumables between applications. Get precision wire feeding and save time without adding complexity to your day. Next is the mobile fume extraction system, the Exento. The Exento comes in both a high-vac and a low-vac version to fit your specific welding needs. The low-vac system includes a flexible extraction arm with 360 degrees of rotation and a flow-optimized hood for exceptional fume capture rate. The high-vac system combines perfectly with the Exento torch kits to remove more than 99.9% of captured fume particulates at the arc to provide excellent extraction in a compact unit. For more information on these products, head on over to froniususa.com. We're also brought to you by Outlaw Leather. Outlaw handcrafts custom leather hoods, arm pads, tool belts, bolt bags, pig ears, and more. Each piece they produce is made by hand using the highest quality of leather available. They even carry exotic leathers like caiman, stingray, elephant, and ostrich. For all your custom orders, just send an email to info@outlawleatherllc.com and the team out there will get you taken care of with their first-class customer service. Or maybe you need something a bit faster. You can shop outlawleather.com and get fast, easy shipping right to your home or job site. And as a listener to the Arc Junkies podcast, you can save 15% off on all their in-stock handmade leather goods when you use Arc Junkies in the discount box at checkout. Don't be fooled by copycats out there. Shop Outlaw Leather and get a quality piece from the originators. All right, you know what time it is. Fire up your machine, drop your hood, and turn me up 5.
Thank you for downloading show number 312 of the Arc Junkies Podcast.
You're listening to the Arc Junkies Podcast, helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
Terry, welcome to the ARC Junkies Podcast.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jason. I'm glad to join with you today.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your background in safety. Like, I preach safety all the time on the podcast. I teach a welding school. I've taught at welding schools for the past 10 years. I've got a pretty comprehensive background when it comes to safety, specifically in the welding aspects. But, like, safety is such a big umbrella. Like, tell me a little bit about your background and experience with safety.
Yeah, sure. So I ended up getting into safety way back in the 90s, actually. I worked for a company that was founded by John Wayne. And at that company, a manufacturing company, I was elected to be the safety manager, more or less, without my consent. Yeah. And it kind of started there, and So after that, I got into the environmental business and did a lot of work for the big oil companies. And then, they were at the front end of safety on a lot of levels because they had a lot of problems in the refineries when they would do big shutdowns. And they were starting to realize the cost and the impact of having too many incidents in those refineries. So in the work that I started doing with the oil companies, which is more on the liability side, I did a lot of environmental remediation, which is cleaning up contaminated sites with groundwater and soil and that kind of thing. And so they basically had told us, if you want to do business with us, you're going to have to go to our safety school. And again, for the probably second or third time in my career, I was nominated to be the safety person and go to this special school. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And, I was more or less forced into it. And over time, I really started to grasp a lot of the concepts that they were teaching us. So even though, like in the beginning, I was a little reluctant and thought, well, what is this? The flavor of the week, it's, and when's it going to go away kind of thing. And not because I wanted to not work safe, but they were so advanced with some of their safety systems that I wasn't ready for it, more or less. So it took a while to catch on. But now I really am glad that I learned all that, way back then, because a lot of the concepts and things, those are things that I help my clients with now. So, a lot of people call me and they need help with their safety programs. And, even though there's a lot to safety, I kind of have it figured out now, but I've been in it for a long time now. So.
Yeah. So we're kind of chatting a little bit before we hit the record button, but that's one of the areas that, especially with welding, a lot of folks, they want to start their own business. And it's great. I mean, welding is a great career path. If you want to start your own business, once you learn the fundamentals and how to fabricate and repair and all that stuff, a lot of people want to start their business. And, when they're putting things together, they're like, okay, I need a truck, I need a building, I need this machine, I need this, I need that, I need these tools, and, I'm going to bid this job. And safety always seems to be an afterthought when it should be kind of almost built into the business plan as a line item, because insurance rates are astronomical for people getting into the welding trade, trying to open your own business as a welder. I mean, heck, I just opened up a welding school, and I think we probably called 20 different companies before we landed on one that would actually just give us a quote. It's like, really? I don't need a policy. I just need a quote.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think that, what you're saying about, trying, that insurance and the safety, when you start out, a lot of times, folks don't really think about that. And, they, like you said, that you want to get the tools, you get the truck, the trailer, whatever you need, and you get out there and you start working. And, eventually you start to have mishaps. And they could be property damage incidents. They could be bodily injury incidents. And the severity level of either of those could be, minimal, or it could be, something that's pretty severe, So the idea in safety is really just to try and prevent loss of control. And the driver in all of this has always been the insurance companies, because they don't want to pay out a lot of money for claims. And the thing is if they have to start, paying out a lot of money, you as the business owner are the one that ends up having to pay in increased insurance premiums. So, it's in everyone's best interest, really, to try and learn to work safe and to take it serious, not just for the money side, because there's the human side of it. And I've investigated thousands of different types of incidents. And the thing is, when you get into bodily injury incidents that are severe and they're life-changing, or some people don't come home at all. And when you see that and you're involved in those kinds of investigations, you really start to do some soul searching, and you ask, why did this happen? This didn't have to happen. And these are all the same things that OSHA says. If you go on the OSHA website, they've got a lot of different resources and things and campaigns, because they see the same statistics year after year: slips, trips, and falls. People die in fall accidents, and and excavation collapses or confined space. They have a lot of fatalities around confined space entry and things like that. So, they know it, they see it. And, sometimes, as workers, we're kind of like, we're not in the know, more or less, on all that. And, eventually over time, you get exposed to these kinds of issues. Mm-hmm. And hopefully, it teaches you to be a better worker. And what I always try and tell people is, if you're going to do your craft, if it's welding or HVAC or whatever it is, try and be the best you can be, and your career, you could have a great career, but safety is a huge part of that too. So try and be as good at the safety side of it as you can be as well, and prevent loss of control.
Yeah.
If you can do your craft and shoot for flawless execution and do the same thing with safety, you could have a great career.
Yeah.
There's plenty of opportunities for people that want to work, do their craft well, and work safe.
So, yeah, that was the thing that I realized. I was like, if I want to stay in this business, because I love welding, I love everything about it. But if I want to stay in this business and make it into a career, I need to put safety as number one, not because of insurance claims and policies and costs and, dealing with OSHA and, non-compliance issues and all that stuff, but just for my physical health. Because I've seen so many people, I've talked to so many different people, and they're like, well, I've been welding for 20 years, I can't see, or, now I've got lung cancer because I didn't protect myself from this, or I'm missing fingers because I put my fingers and hands where there used to be a guard in place, just things like this. So I'm always vigilant, especially when I go into a new environment, because because I did on-site construction for years, and every site that you go to poses its own hazards. So you don't get an opportunity to become complacent, whereas somebody that works in a manufacturing environment or a shop environment, they develop that sense of complacency to where, as they're working, they get comfortable in the daily tasks that they're doing. They know how that piece of equipment operates. They know the floor layout. They know the other workers that are in the area, and they get complacent. And that's typically when accidents happen. That's one of the things they told us in the Marines all the time is complacency kills. And it didn't make sense when they would say it. But if you start sitting back and analyzing, looking at things, it's oh yeah, if I'm not vigilant and paying attention to the task at hand and what I'm actually doing, there could be a loss of limb or a loss of life, myself or the person that's working right next to me.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. It's like I say, it's like keeping your mind engaged in the task of what you're doing. And you brought up a great point about complacency. And if you work in a manufacturing facility, let's say, and you're making widgets, I call that a static work environment because there's not a lot of change. The routine is the same. You might be using the same machines all day long, and you could do it in your sleep. And it gets pretty dangerous, when you start to check out mentally because your mind goes somewhere else, and you're doing the task. It's kind of like, if sometimes you may drive home and you've got a lot on your mind, and all of a sudden you're home, and you don't realize that whole time you were driving, you don't even remember it
Yeah.
because you were thinking about something else. And the same thing can happen in a work environment, and people get hurt that way. So, I worked in aerospace too. So I saw some pretty serious accidents in a factory, setting there. So, but complacency, that was one of the things that came into play, so that's very true. And the thing you said about, the construction type of work is a lot of times there's a lot going on, and you may have other trades there. So there's a lot of factors. The hazards are the same in any workplace. The hazard classes or categories are essentially the same, but the level of those hazards or the probability of something happen and the severity level changes depending on the work environment. So
Hmm.
yeah, but it gets pretty interesting when you really start to like dive in, and when you do a lot of incident investigations, you see a lot of stuff, but it's a lot of times it's the same things. No procedures. Somebody was, shortcutting procedures. They were complacent. They were using the wrong tool, didn't have the proper training to do what they were doing. And, so a lot of the root causes uh, on these incident investigations that I do, it boils down to usually there's 7 root causes. And it could be a combination of those root causes for why incidents happen. But yeah, it gets pretty interesting when you really start looking at the actual incidents and why they happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
it still blows my mind that falls are the number one because like I got into construction, structural steel ironwork back in like 2005. I didn't have any formal safety training until like outside of the military. I didn't have any formal safety training until 2010 when I joined the union, and I had to go through OSHA 10. So
yeah,
that was 2010, and the number one cause of construction accidents was falls.
yeah,
And then 2000, I want to say 2013, I was working on I was working on my associates to pursue my bachelor's, and I had to take a construction safety class. And again, 2013, 3 years later, falls are still number one. And then 2 years after that, I went and did my OSHA 30 training. And again, falls are still number one. And then here we are, 2024, falls are still the number one cause of death when it comes to construction. And it's
yeah,
crazy because there's so many systems in place. It makes me wonder, like, what's the root cause of the falls typically?
yeah,
Because a lot of things can lead up to it, but I think electrical shock could be like the initial effect, and then that causes a fall. But
yeah.
still, I mean, you've got harnesses, you've got sky webbing, you have all working out of man lifts and baskets. You have all these things in place, and falls are still number one. So what do you think is behind that number one cause of death in construction?
Well, I think really what it boils down to is a lot of times it's just the training itself, because they don't get enough. A lot of times workers just don't get enough training on fall protection, and just taking a class on it isn't enough. You need to like learn how to put on the yo-yos and the harnesses and and actually like you spend time using it. And I've said this before, but it's like, when you're a kid and you get your driver's license, and the day you get your driver's license, you're happy, you can go out and drive. but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can get in the car and drive cross country and get there safely. Mm. And so I attribute the fall problems mainly to skill level and how much time that person has had, using the harnesses. Because if you don't use them every day, you could misuse them. Mm. And so that there's a lot of misuse or they have the wrong fall protection. So when I do site inspections, like I have a client that's doing, the last 2 years, they've been doing an upgrade to what is this? It's like a giant water treatment system, and they've got big tanks, and there's a lot of stuff at heights. So, when I do these inspections, one of the first things I look at is, do they have the fall protection on? Are they clipped off correctly? And, are they using it correctly? Because there's been many times that where I've saw a guy in a man basket, and I asked him to bring the basket down, and he didn't have the right kind of fall protection. So I said, hey, and he was a subcontractor for one of my clients, and I said, hey, can I ask you a question? He said, yeah, what? And I said, have you ever had fall protection training? And he started kind of like skirting around the issue, and he's, and basically he didn't have fall protection training, but he had a harness on. And as I was talking to him about it, I could tell he didn't want me questioning him about, what he was doing and this and that.
Nobody wants to talk to the safety guy.
Yeah. And I said, hey, look, I just want to point something out to you. What you're wearing, the harness that you're wearing, is designed to, break apart if you fall from heights. And it's not even the right type of lanyard, right? And so if you fall out of that basket, that thing is going to open up and you're going to hit the ground before it does anything. And he didn't know. He had no idea what he was wearing. He just thought this is, grab the first thing he could put on,
Yeah, I'm compliant. Back in the lift. Yeah. Off to do the work. Yeah.
And I worked with a lady not very long ago, actually. She was really a great person. And she had a 23-year-old son who, he hadn't been in the workforce for very long, but he's working at a warehouse. And the rains come, and his boss is in a panic because the skylights start leaking water into the warehouse. So they all rally and go get some visqueen plastic, and they climb up the ladder on the side of the building. They go up on the roof, and they start covering up the skylights with plastic so no water would get through. And the kid, falls through the skylight and ends up, passing away from his injuries. But that story, to hear the lady that I worked with, I won't say her name, but she told me personally the story and the calls that she got, the last call that she got from the hospital when she arrived, and they basically told her, your son passed away. And she's literally in the parking lot of the hospital, had just gotten out of her car, and she never got to say goodbye. And it just, out of a weird set of circumstances, I ended up hiring her daughter for a short-term project I was doing, a safety project. And I saw the impact of that on their family. And man, it just, if they could just go back in time, and if that kid would have got a little bit of training about hazard recognition, stop work authority, if you're not comfortable doing something or you don't have the proper training and knowledge to do it, to feel comfortable enough to say, hey, look, I don't think this is a good idea for me because I've never worked up at heights. The guy He had no information about skylights and, on a roof, those skylights, if there's no barrier, it's like an eggshell.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to them. And believe it or not, there's a lot of facilities, warehouses, and things like that exist where there's no physical barrier over the top of those things. And I've even seen an incident happen before where a worker was working up on a roof on an HVAC system, and he was going to take a break. He had his lunch bag or his lunch box with him, and he actually sat down on top of the skylight. The sun had weathered it, so it had like a yellow look to it, and you couldn't see through, and he didn't really know. And he went to sit on it, and it's essentially just like an open hole. And he fell down to the level below, and he passed away. So hazard recognition is one of the best things any employer can do to try and teach their workers, how to be safe. And the younger folks that are coming into the workforce, a lot of them, they don't know anything about how to go recognize hazards. And a lot of them haven't really worked with tools and wrenches and all the things that, when we were younger, we lived in our garage. We were in our dad had a lot of tools, and
all up in his toolbox.
Yeah. And it's not like that. It's not so much like that anymore. So they're sort of like at a disadvantage in a way, because the more you work with tools, the better you are at kind of recognizing, hazards that are associated with tools. But, there's a lot of ways to get hurt on the job, and taking the time to teach people and be a good teacher is like one of the best things you could do for somebody, because, the time that you spend teaching them about how to do their job and how to do their job safely, that might end up being something that saves their life someday. You never know. So it's important, I think.
Yeah. You're 100% right about those skylights. I used to do pre-manufactured metal building installs, and we would put those skylights in, and it's just a flimsy fiberglass sheet of, whatever. It's not much thicker than the the R panel that you're screwing down. And after a while, like, because we've done re-roofs and all that stuff, you go to have to pull that stuff back up, and it literally just falls apart. So if you put any weight on that, you're going through. There should almost be like a barrier, because like you said, there's no perimeter around skylights up on top of a building. I mean, it sits flat with the rest of the roof. You really can't identify that as a hazard.
Yeah, and I think in California, there's a law. Those are supposed to be protected, and there's actually like a cage that when they install the skylight, there's a cage they can put over it, and it won't have any effect on how much light comes through. But it will protect somebody. Like I was on this rooftop. It was a 1 million square foot facility where they manufacture cars. There was hundreds of skylights on that rooftop. And there was probably 7 or 8 giant HVAC units. So the probability of workers being up there to maintain the HVAC units is extremely high. The number of skylights that are up there, if you just do the math on it, you think, okay, over the life of this building, how many workers are going to need to be up there to maintain all those HVAC units? And how many skylights are there? And what's the likelihood that somebody could end up going through one of them because they're not protected? And if you just do the basic math on it, that's a lot. The probability is very high.
Yeah, there's a lot of foot traffic on there. You got to swap out filters all the time. Units go down. They got to go up there and swap out compressors and pumps and all that stuff. It's not an area you want to be walking around with.
Yeah, so you have to, I think earlier I said, like with safety, all you're really trying to do is prevent loss of control. So in a situation like that, if I was your inspector or you were my client, I would say, what controls can we put in place to make sure nobody ever falls through one of those skylights? And I had to have that conversation with the client. And, money always comes up, the budget and this and that. And for them to put all these barriers up over the skylights, the cages, it would have been a lot of money. So we came up with some other ways to have some controls by, using walkways, and we set up some fencing so it would be impossible for anybody to walk outside the area that they needed to get to the HVAC unit. So we came up with a remedy. And sometimes you have to get creative about it, depending on what you're doing,
Yeah.
So
Everybody wants to say that. Well, the cost of, to do that, to put all that stuff in place. Well, yeah, I mean, that is an expenditure. What's the cost of losing a life?
Well, there you go.
Shut your entire business down.
Yeah.
I mean, and not to say that the cost of life, and all that, but I mean, like, if you think about it at the human level, that's a loss of life. That's on you because you had the opportunity to put some sort of protections in place and you chose not to because of budgetary confinements.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I'm trying to deal with clients, I always will try to figure out a way to work with their budget, because sometimes they just don't have the money. But I say, okay, well, in all honesty, in that case, the developer should have been on the hook to put those barriers on. But that ship sailed long ago. So he's not going to be able to go back and get the money for that. So what remedy can we put in that will be effective? And this is where creativity really comes in. That will, serve everybody's purpose. So the ladder going up the side of the building, we had special locks put on it. We had sensors put on it. So if the thing ever opens, it's hooked to telemetry, and the plant manager knows somebody's trying to access the roof without authorization. There's a lot of little things you can add in there too that aren't super expensive, but it'll give you the ability to maintain control. So yeah, sometimes it gets like, you got to really do a deep dive
Right.
to come up with the solutions. And, but by doing that, you're, again, like I said, prevent somebody from getting hurt or maybe dying, because, if you didn't have the controls, it could have gone south on you,
Yeah. No, so you work with different clients. I mean, you're like a safety guru, safety expert type guy. And you work with consultants or you work with clients and you consult them on best practices of safety. What have you found that has been like the best way to get buy-in from the employees? And I want to ask you an additional, or kind of preface that question.
Uh-huh.
When I was in construction, they would try a couple of different techniques to get everybody to buy in, and none of them were really effective. And I didn't realize that until I actually sat through the OSHA class when I went through my working on my bachelor's. One of the methods is punishment. Okay, if you're not going to do the job safely or whatever, I'm going to punish you. So I'm going to either terminate you, I'm going to dock your pay, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. That doesn't work because nobody wants to report a hazard or an incident because they don't want the ramifications. They don't want to get fired.
Yes.
They would also try incentivizing. So I worked for a company and they would give us $1.25 per hour if there was no lost time incidents over the course of a quarter. So, I mean, you add that up, we're working 60, 70 hours a week over the course of, 12 weeks. I mean, do the math at $1.25. That's a pretty big, incentive not to say anything.
Right. And that's yeah.
Or like, pizza parties, that's a big thing in, construction or whatever. Pizza parties or like the catered breakfast or whatever. I mean, they would try these different incentive programs to get everybody to buy in and do things safely. But when you put those incentive programs or those disciplinary programs in place, nobody's really buying in. Nobody's just reporting anything. I mean, people are getting cut and they're, I don't want to lose out on my safety bonus. So, over goes the paper towel and then we'll wrap that up with electrical tape and then we'll shove that in the welding glove. And hey, boss, I didn't get hurt today. Or, they tweak a muscle and then they wait until, their day off, Saturday or Sunday. And then they go to the urgent care and they're like, oh no, I was moving a bag of mulch, so I twisted my back at home, not at work. So they start, covering these things up. So what have you found is the best way to get in, employee buy-in or at the worker level, the people that are exposed to these hazards?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and you brought up some great points, I thought. So let me kind of break it down for you. The best way for me, like what I've learned is you kind of have to frame it up like, uh, you know, you want to try and coach people as much as you can. And I will look at it like, or pitch it more like, I just want you to be the best you can be at your job and be safe, right? And to incentivize it, OSHA doesn't like that. They really don't, because of exactly what you said. I remember when I worked at that company that was founded by John Wayne, they had, as part of the safety program, it was before I started doing anything with safety there, they had this booklet. And essentially, if you didn't get hurt that month, you could pick from a prize in the book. Okay, so for every month that goes by through the year, the prize gets better. And at the very end of the year, if you get to like the very end of the book, there's a camera, there's like some pretty cool stuff you can get. But all it does is basically do exactly what you said, is it's going to put the peer pressure on you not to report, because your buddy is looking forward to getting that camera, at the end of the year. That's, everybody wants the best prize, right? And so those types of things don't really work very well. And OSHA actually discourages it. And a client that I was working with recently tried to incentivize, and they had some formula they were using. And I was trying to tell him, I don't know if that's a great idea. And it ended up backfiring on him within 6 months. And I won't get into all the details for why, but so yeah, that doesn't really work. And if you're too harsh and people are going to get fired, or they're not going to report things. However, there is a fine line. So the idea is, we'll call it like a behavior-based safety program, you need to have buy-in from ownership. So the leaders have to actively be involved. And because if they just say, look, we expect you guys to all go out and be safe, and nope, and they're not providing you the tools and the resources, people see through it, and then they're not going to really want to follow the program. So I do a lot of coaching, and there's different strategies for how to coach people and get them, to buy in. Some workers, they'll jump right in and they get involved, and there's different activities and different things you can do to like get them involved in the program. And you might have some people that they'll say that they're on board, but when it comes time to actions, you're not going to get anything out of them. And that's just how they're wired. So you kind of have to know that not everybody is going to be as proactive as you need them to be. But if you have workers that are knowingly violating safety policies, you have to have teeth in your safety program. That means people need to be reprimanded, verbal warnings, and written up, and sometimes you got to let them go. The reason is because if you have 90% of your workforce, they're all trying to do the right thing and work safe, and you have a couple of rogue employees that are not taking it seriously, those guys are going to be putting other people at risk. Mm-hmm. And it starts to deteriorate your safety program. So the right thing to do is get rid of the cancer, because you can replace those two with two more that will buy into the program. And so I'm not a huge advocate for going and, swinging an axe and just getting rid of a bunch of people. That's not how you do it. But what I say is, as you're building your company or your business, you want to try and find people that I say it like it's the right person for the right seat. So they have to be kind of like-minded in what you're trying to build. And if they don't take safety serious, or they don't care, and as a leader, when I said you get farther with sugar than you do with vinegar, if your leadership and your supervisors really truly care about the workers are going to know it. And they will respond to that. You get respect from them for it. And they will kind of like follow along, and they will buy into your system. But if you're just, barking orders and you're telling everybody this is what they have to do, and you're not providing them like the right environment, they're going to just see right through it, and they're not going to follow, so it's kind of, that's why I think like having a consultant to help you with your safety program, especially if you're growing your business and your business is starting to get big, and you're adding a lot of employees, it can get really challenging. So you have to say, how are we going to steer the safety ship and prevent incidents from happening? And sometimes just having somebody like come in and help you come up with a plan, a strategy, it's a lot better. Then it's like, oh, okay, this is what we're going to do. We need to have monthly meetings. We need to do tailgate meetings. We're doing a lot of welding all the time, so we have to use a hot work permit system. All those things protect you as an employer, by having a safety program. And in some of the incidents that I've investigated, when somebody gets hurt, like last year, a guy fell through a roof. He was doing HVAC work. He was a subcontractor, long story, but OSHA gets involved. And what happens is they do this investigation, and they're going to come to you if you're the employer, and they're going to ask you to provide a whole bunch of safety documents, things that have nothing to do with the actual incident itself. So when you're an employer and you start bringing on people, you need to do onboarding training for the workers. You need to have certain program documents that are in place. And if you have all of that, if the day ever comes where OSHA's knocking on your door, you can provide them all these documents in your program, and they will look at it. And if there's fines involved, sometimes they're a lot more lenient if you have everything that they're asking for. And they'll give you a window of time to provide all those things. But if you have it all up front and you're ready, prepared, right, then, it's a lot easier, than, not having it, because you'll be scrambling. And, so in most of the cases, just this is probably good for your listeners to hear, is that when I've dealt with OSHA inspectors on different things that have happened, they're usually very easy to work with, as long as you provide them the stuff that they're looking for. And, they've been good to work with. So they're not always out to get you. I just want people to know that my experience with OSHA has been good, as long as you're professional and you're trying to do the right thing.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This segment of the ARC Junkies podcast is brought to you by IsoTunes, where hearing meets protection. IsoTunes Pro Aware earplugs bring something no other IsoTunes model has: in-ear wireless hearing protection with situational awareness. With level-dependent aware technology, workers can hear colleagues and other environmental sounds without the fear of hearing damage. Pro Aware protects workers from loud impulse noises while still providing the features IsoTune customers know and love. I love my IsoTunes and use them while I'm at work and for home projects after hours and on the weekends. And right now, you can save 10% at checkout when you use ARCJunkies10 in the discount box at checkout when you shop isotunes.com. We're also brought to you by Everlast Welders. The holidays may be over, but the holiday bundle packs from Everlast aren't. You can score an awesome bundle pack on some of Everlast's most popular machines to include the Lightning, Typhoon, Hurricane, Cyclone, and Power Plasma units. Now's the time to save with Everlast on awesome bundle packs for the home shop and small business. Just head over to everlastwelders.com and pick your new machine today. And as always, if you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal, just type in ARC Junkies in the comments section at checkout and get that free Nova foot pedal and TIG torch upgrade. Everlast Welders. Weld mean, weld green. Now let's get back to the show. Yeah, that's the general consensus is they're the cops of construction, and they're there to arrest you every time, or like pass out a hefty fine. Because I mean that's all anybody talks about is like you have to do this or OSHA's going to fine you $10,000. You have to do that or OSHA's going to fine you $15,000. So it's like they don't have the best reputation. OSHA and the safety guy they usually don't have the best reputation on a job site.
Yeah,
but I think oh, good.
Yeah, I'm trying to change that today.
Right.
I want people at the end of this podcast to say, okay, that safety guy, he's not so bad. I'm not the cop, and neither is OSHA, for the most part.
Yeah.
We're just trying to make sure nobody gets hurt and protect not only you as the employer, but the employees, the workers,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the best things that employers could do for their employees is educate them. Because a lot of times you just give them a bunch of, like, here's the rules. Like, you have to do this, you have to do that. You got to fill out a JSA. We have to do a lift plan. We have to have a toolbox talk every Monday, da-da-da. And it's like, from the worker standpoint, they're like, okay, right now you're standing between me and the shit that I have to get done. Like, you gave me a timeline to get all this stuff done, and now you're throwing, like, more paperwork in here and, like, these little safety meetings, and now we got to do stretching exercises before we get into the work. Like, let me just get to the work, man. Get out of the way. So, like, you're doing all this stuff. It's very cumbersome. But if you explain why, and they start to take that serious, okay, you got to do a JSA. Well, why do I have to do a JSA? Well, because we're going to do an analysis on the site that we're working, and we're going to identify the hazards. So as you're going through that little checklist, you're not looking for the hazards. It's 6:00 in the morning. You're like halfway through your Monster Energy drink or your coffee, and your mind's thinking, okay, I've got to make these connections. We got to pick up this beam and set it over here. You're not thinking about the hazards. You're thinking about the work that needs to be performed. Okay, well, like another crew's over here, they're digging a huge hole out in the side. So now you can't get your lift over there. You got to come up with something else. Like, you'll be able to identify these different hazards that are between you and getting the work done safely. And that's why we have to fill out that paperwork. It's not just added information so that, if something does happen, we have all of our ducks in a row. It's literally put in place. People don't understand why we have to do these things. Once they understand why, you can get a better buy-in. Because I was in the same spot. Like, I had to fill out like JSAs, lift plans, all this stuff. And it's like, same thing. Like, you're just getting between me and my work. Let me get my guys out there and, let me start getting stuff done. That's what I'm here for. That's what I do. I make shit happen. But I can't do that if you keep giving me paperwork. But if you sit back and actually look at it and do an actual analysis, you're going to start seeing things that you weren't looking for. You're going to see these, there's rebar over here uncapped where we're getting ready to, start erecting steel. Okay, well, that's got to get capped. I need to go get it with the GC or the foreman or whatever and let him know that, before my guys get over there and start working out of man lifts and baskets and, walking the iron, we need to cap those rebars. Or, whatever the case may be, you'll start to identify these hazards. That's why we have to do that. Same thing with a rigging plan. Okay, let's start figuring out how much weight we're picking up. Do we have the correct shackles? Do we have the correct straps? Do we have the correct chokers? Like all this stuff. It's there to make you stop for a minute and think about the work that you're getting ready to perform and identify and mitigate those hazards.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's well said. A lot of people, I've written hundreds of JSAs and AHAs over the years, and some of them, like the oil companies, like them not always handwritten. They like them electronic versions that are completely, they've been gone through a million times. So if I do an incident investigation for a client, they might have their whole set of JSAs. So I will say, okay, let's say this worker, they got their finger pinched off lifting a piece of metal grating. This is actually something that happened. Where's the JSA for accessing vaults and pits? Because they have one for that. So I go back and look at that JSA. Does it say anything in there about pinch points? Does it say anything in there about the weight of the metal grating and how it's going to be lifted? And when I start to break it down and figure out how that incident happened, then I go back to that JSA and say, is everything in there covered? And if it is, then it could be like the worker didn't follow the JSA. But if I look at the JSA and there's gaps in it and it's too lean and it's not covering all the hazards, then I could say, well, part of the root cause is that the JSA was inadequate. So that might be part of, what the corrective action will be. Update the JSA, retrain employees on the JSA, things like that. But yeah, you can get pretty deep on a lot of the stuff, but the documents are important to keep people's mind engaged in what they're about to do. So there's different schools of thought about, well, should we handwrite the JSA at the job site during the tailgate, or should we have them pre-made? And so I've always said to people, you do whatever your company is best for your company, but as long as you're talking about, the things that, the tasks and the potential hazards and how you're going to mitigate them, that's the key thing, and it's a great training tool for younger workers, because it gets their mind thinking, okay, well, this is the process. And if nobody takes the time to teach them that, then, they're just going to show up at the job site like the guy a year ago that fell through the roof. He basically was on the job for 15, 20 minutes at the most. He pulled up, took his ladder out of his truck, threw it up against the side of a building, went to climb up the building, jumps over the side, and he didn't know that there was a hole in the roof. So when he jumps over the side thinking he's going to be hitting the top of the roof, there's a hole, and he goes right through the building and goes 16 feet down. He didn't get hurt, but it was a trip to the hospital and an ambulance and a lawsuit and an OSHA investigation. And all because the guy didn't even go do the tailgate safety meeting with the contractor. So sometimes people they go rogue, and they will show up and they start working. And when you have multiple trades working on site, and if you're the contractor, you're kind of responsible for the subcontractors and making sure that they're following along and they're being safe. And sometimes, those things get overlooked because, various reasons, but it's kind of good to try and get everybody on the same page. The other thing about the morning tailgate meetings that's important is a lot of times you get a good chance to see who is mentally prepared for work and fit for duty, because people have actually showed up and they're in no condition to be at work. And I've seen a situation where at the tailgate meeting, they were doing the stretch and flex, and I heard you talk about that. And when they first started doing all that and introducing that, everyone's like, really? We got to start doing stretch and flex, and this particular job site had about 40 workers there. And one of the workers was having a stroke at the time they were doing the stretch and flex, and he couldn't perform certain stretches, and the supervisor noticed that he was standing weird, and he was like, he couldn't balance, and the guy almost fell over, and the supervisor caught him, and they realized he was having a stroke. His job, he was a heavy equipment operator. And, if the timing was, just 20 minutes one way or the other, that he could have ended up being a piece of heavy equipment and hurting someone. And unfortunately, the guy passed away a few days later. But, it shows you, and this is why I always tell people, when you're on job sites and you're working around heavy equipment, and especially those reach lifts and, maybe skid steers and things, people tend to get close to those mini X's and things. And I say, you better make sure you're not too close, because if anything happens to the operator, he could hit you with the piece of equipment. And I've seen struck by incidents and things like that. So I always say, you can turn the machine off if you need to get close, but don't get right up against the equipment.
Yeah,
And
getting into pinch points and all that.
yeah, yeah, those little skid steers and stuff, they're fast. And I've seen people, so I've seen some close calls with my own two eyes. I saw a guy crouch down. He was too low. The guy's in the skid steer, and he's got it revved up super high. They're working in a small area, and he goes backwards in it. And that thing, in 2 seconds, he's covered like 20 feet, and there's no time to get out of the way. So, yeah, those are little things.
Yeah, well, especially anytime you're working around heavy equipment, and when you have other trades on a job site. I was on one, and it's Friday, it's 3:00, everybody's packing up to go home, and they've got one guy, he's in the man lift, it's probably a 60-foot man lift, so he's got the telescope all the way down, and he's loading up his tools, because he's going to drive that over to where his truck is. It's beer 30, I got to get out of here. Well, the electrician's got the same idea. He backs up his Chevy Blazer over there on the other side of the machine to start loading up his tools. And the guy that was operating the man lift, he didn't realize that truck had pulled up, and now it's in his way. So he hops back in and fires the machine back up, and full bore, 10 feet. he starts closing in, and boom, just blows the back end of this guy's truck out.
Right. Wow.
So now nobody's going home for a beer at 3:30. Now we've got to wait for an investigation to fire up because both of them got complacent, and the guy that was running the man lift, he's like kind of on autopilot. He's like, when I pulled this machine over here, there wasn't anything on the other side of it. So I can be rest assured that, you need to like check 360 around the machine, make sure, especially in an active construction site, because things change by the minute, especially if you're working around other trades, because you don't have any communication with that other crew that's working over there. They're doing some completely different task. That's why it's always a good plan to like chat. The supervisors or foremans, they should be chatting with one another. That wouldn't have prevented that situation because it was, again, complacency.
Yeah.
But luckily that guy wasn't standing loading his truck in between the man lift and the back of his truck when it made contact. Otherwise it would have been a loss of life right there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And the communication factor is so important when you have multiple trades on job sites, and, setting up perimeters and, different work zones and just, making sure that everybody's kind of like on the same page, because, man, I've seen so many jobs where, nobody's talking to each other, and you could see it. And sometimes when you're out there, like I was on a site inspection 3-4 months ago, and you could feel it. There was a guy running a reach lift. There's guys running an asphalt saw. They're sawing asphalt behind the reach lift. 2 different groups. The guy in the reach lift is focused on what he's doing that's in front of him, and I could just feel it. Something's going to happen, because the guy in the reach lift has had no communication with the people behind him. The people that are behind him are 5 feet away, and they have their back to the reach lift. And I said, no, this is not going to happen. So I shut it down, and, and I said, hey, I'm here to do an inspection. I'm not going to interfere with your work, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is unsafe. So I want you guys to stop. You let this guy finish what he's doing with the reach lift, then you fire up the saw, but don't ever put your back to the machine, because that guy had no idea you were behind him and he wasn't looking. So it only takes a second. He's going to forget, there was ever anybody back there if he did see him. So, those are the types of things where, if you see something, it's so important to speak up too, because a lot of times before there's these serious accidents and things that happen on the job site, if you interview the witnesses, a lot of times they say they didn't feel safe, and they could sense that something was wrong, and that there was usually a lead up to what happened before the incident, and that in that lead up, a lot of times there's a huge opportunity for people to put something in place to prevent things from happening. But a lot of times people just don't speak up enough and talk. So it's important for all workers to know that, if they see something that's questionable, don't just, not say anything. Because sometimes it involves the same worker. I had a project manager call me one day, and she said they had 7 near misses on one drilling project in the same week.
Jeez.
And I said, why didn't you call me after the second or third one? And so we started doing a deep dive on it, figured out all these near misses were associated with one person on the project. So when I started unraveling the mess and trying to figure it all out, I said, that guy's got to go. He's going to hurt somebody. And he was known to other people that were in that company. And they said the dude was a rogue worker, and they knew about him like 8 or 9 years ago. And he kind of like disappeared from the industry and then got back into it. And they're like, oh no, we know about this guy. We worked with him 7, 8 years ago. And so, yeah, you just have to sometimes, speak up most of the time.
And I think the whole see something, say something, it's just been beaten to the ground, and it sounds so cliche, but at the end of the day, like, you're responsible for your own safety. And if you don't say something to prevent that going forward, you're going to feel really bad when something happens because you didn't say something.
Yeah.
If you see something that's unsafe, or you, and that's why they say safety is everybody's responsibility. And it is, when you're on a job site, everybody's got the same level of authority to shut something down. You walk over there and say, hey, that's not safe. Whether it's people are trenching without, having adequate shoring, or, they're working at heights and they're not tied off, like, say something to somebody, because you could be saving somebody's life. And 9 times out of 10, somebody else is going to be the one to hurt you. You could be on the job site. You could be the safest one. You got all the guards in place. You're all PPE'd up. You're doing everything right. And somebody else is going to be the one to hurt you. So you've got to, situational awareness is huge. But if you see something that's unsafe, you have the right to like stop the work. And there shouldn't be any repercussions or disciplinary action because you shut something down. Just to like, okay, hey, everybody bring it in real quick. Let's get this under control, and then we can move forward. We're going to be out here for a while. This job's 6 months. Let's go ahead and work this out like right now, so it's not an ongoing issue every single day, and we're just waiting for that fuse to get lit. Yeah.
I think it's also important to, that's a good point that you said that, but it's important for people to also know that, don't get your feelings hurt if somebody calls you out on something, because sometimes, we all gap, for one reason or another. And if everybody's just looking out for everybody, it's for the greater good of the project, for, everybody's safety. And I have a couple of clients right now that I'm working with when they have these large groups of workers. Like one project, I've been going out there weekly for a year, and it's a big infrastructure project, and the crew is so safe. And when I go out and do these site inspections, they're so good at what they do. And the foreman and the super are so good at mentoring everybody and making sure everybody has the right stuff. And their communication is good. When I go out there, it's hard for me to find anything that's really seriously problematic or questionable. And so they make my job hard. And I'm glad that it's like that, because it's like a well-oiled machine. And when everybody's working like a well-oiled machine, it's nice, because they're being productive and they're being safe, and they're all making money, good money. So that's really ideal. That's the ideal situation. So it's find your synchronicity, with your team. And if it starts getting too clunky, and sometimes you got to try and unravel it, figure out what's the problem, where's the problem coming from, and then fix it. So
Yeah, that's another way to look at it too. I mean, nobody's doing this job for fun, right? At
Yeah.
the end of the day, we all need a paycheck. Well, if you're out there and you're working unsafe, well, guess what? That paycheck's going to dry up. Or if somebody else out
Yeah.
there is doing something unsafe, and now there's a whole investigation. Like, you don't get to continue the work while the investigation's being performed. You get shut down, and guess what? You're not getting paid for that. So, I mean, that's
Yeah.
going to start hitting you in the pocketbook. So that's another good reason to work safe. And then if you see something that's not being performed correctly, or it's things look awry or they look out of sorts, like, say something to somebody, get that squared away and fixed so that everybody continues on to get the project done and make the money and move on to the next job.
Yeah, for sure. I had kind of something different, but I'll share this. Uh, a friend that's outside my work circle, we'll say, he's been an electrician for 23 years. He has never missed a day of work or been late. He's that guy, and he's risen up to a superintendent, and he's been working at the same company for a long time. So when was this? Probably 6 months ago. I find out that he's on the job and he's standing on a 3-foot step ladder. He falls off the step ladder and ends up falling on a hammer drill that was the drill was facing upward, and he impaled himself.
Jeez.
The drill, the bit, went up through his testicles and went up inside him about 5 inches. And luckily, it didn't hit any vital organs. I mean, the testicles
pretty
is
vital.
bad enough. I would say that's a vital organ. But it didn't kill him. It didn't puncture intestines. It didn't, he got kind of lucky in a way. He's still recovering from it, but the guy has never been involved in a workplace accident, and it's just a fluke thing, And so, the point being is, we always have to be looking out, and you said take responsibility for your own safety and make sure that you're just always on your A game, and because there's a lot of ways you can get hurt. And so if the day ever comes where you do get hurt, you definitely, don't want it to be severe. But I think there's probably a lot of times where we've been on jobs and there's probably been some close calls that we weren't even aware of. I mean, I've spent most of my adult life in the field, doing construction work or environmental work and things like that. And, I think about some of the things, just replay some of the jobs that I was at and things that had happened over the years. And I got to say, I feel very fortunate that I haven't been seriously injured, but, I have had injuries along the way. So, but luckily nothing serious. And so when you get to the end of your career and you get to the point where you want to retire, you don't want to be all beat up, because your quality of life isn't going to be good. So,
Yeah, you want to be able to enjoy your retirement.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what everybody's working towards anyway.
Yeah. I have a cousin. My cousin's a firefighter, paramedic, and he was able to get on the air rescue helicopter, and he's been doing that for about 8 years. But over the course of his career, and I think it's been 23 years he's been a firefighter, he's had knee surgeries, shoulder surgeries. Most recently, he had a foot surgery and another knee. And the guy, he's kind of going to be like forced to retire because, if he gets hurt one more time, he's done. It's going to be serious. So I just had a conversation with him 2 days ago about the retirement because he's faced with, what do I do? The fire department's about ready to get 2 of these new Black Hawk helicopters, and he's got to do training if he wants to stay in. And his recovery from his surgeries hasn't gone well. So he's like at this part in his career where he doesn't want to step away, but he knows that his body is beat up and he can't afford another injury. So he's probably going to have to retire. He's struggling with it. It sounds, it's not even about money and whether he can afford to retire. It's more about mentally, he's not ready to leave the fire department.
Yeah, he doesn't want to stop working. He enjoys the work.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting when we are faced with those kinds of things, things you would never think of when you start out, your career.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of people love what they do. They don't want to stop working. Everybody asks me like, what are you going to do when you retire? And I was like, I don't know that I am going to retire. Like, why? What am I going to do with retirement? Go to the beach? I mean, I live in Florida. I mean, I can go to the beach any weekend that I want to go to the beach.
Yeah.
But I enjoy the work that I do. I mean, it's not as physical as it used to be, but it's different now. But like, I enjoy the work. But again, like, I want to be able to, if somebody told me tomorrow, like, hey, you can't do your craft anymore. You're a liability because of, health issues or, injuries or surgeries or recovery or whatever. Like, you're gonna have to go sit on the bench. Yeah. I mean, that's like telling like a pro NFL player, like, hey, yeah, you got too many injuries. You got to go sit on the bench. Your dream's over. I mean, like, this is our Super Bowl, as skilled tradespeople. This is what we enjoy doing. This is what we like to do. I mean, most of the folks that I talk to anyway, they're passionate about what they do. So to be able, to be shut down because you got injured, and then let's say that injury could have been avoided if somebody would have said something or if you would have had the proper training. Well, now you're adding insult to injury.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, education, getting buy-in from the whole crew, making it a proactive, sport. Like, safety can't be a spectator sport. You got to have everybody's involvement. You got to bring everybody in. Everybody's got to be involved in the plan. Everybody's got to know what's going on. That's when things are going to go correctly. That's when things are going to go right. You got to get buy-in from everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And all those rules and stuff they're there for a reason,
Yep.
They say a lot of those, the safety rules and regulations are written in blood, because people suffered. So, and like you said earlier about the falls, it's just one of those things that, next year it might be the same thing, that's top hazard, So, that's why we all just have to continue to be on our A game and take it serious. And, hopefully there's a safe outcome for everybody.
Yeah, I was going to say, hopefully we start chipping away at that number, even though it's number one. Hopefully we have less every year as, going forward. We might not be able to change what that, that hazard is, but maybe we could chip away and bring the numbers down.
Yeah. And, the good thing about this podcast, and I'll tell you that I enjoy doing podcasts, and I appreciate the fact that, you let me come on here today and talk about this stuff, because it is important to get it out there and let people hear about these things that happen in the workplace. And hopefully maybe something that we said today will spark some idea or thought for somebody and prevent them from getting hurt, or make them want to be a little more proactive with safety. And, and if we can accomplish that, then, that's successful in my book. So
that's the goal. That's like, there's not too many people that talk about safety. I mean, there's a bunch of welding podcasts out there, but how many times we bring it up, some of the stuff that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So, I mean, I think, and a lot of people, they don't get that education. Like, I've worked for companies, like I said, I worked in construction from 2005 to 2010 before I got any formal training in regards to safety. Like, I didn't know what OSHA 10 was. I thought they were just the police that come in there and tell me I can't leave my electrode in my stinger, when I walk away, or that I need to be tied off. I didn't know that they actually have classes and training and there's certificates you can get to make you a safer, more productive worker. And so that's kind of why I want to do this. Like, I had Jerome Spear on the podcast. We talked about, like on-site industrial hygiene. Like, he's an industrial hygienist. So we talked all about fume mitigation and all that stuff, because there's so many people out there that their company doesn't have a safety program. This may be the only place they're going to get that information. they might be on the job site or, on their way to work this morning when they're listening to the podcast and they're like, oh, wow, like I just learned something. Okay. Now they know what to look for going forward. And it's just like, that's the goal of the show, is to help educate and inspire the next generation of welders. And I try to do that with every guest that I bring on and every episode that we put out.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't tell you this, but one of the things that I do for clients as well is I write site-specific safety plans for projects. So I've probably written over 600 now. So some of them are very complex projects with a lot of contaminants or chemicals of concern, or like you mentioned, fumes, like welding fumes and how to mitigate those fumes. So if any of your listeners ever need help with site-specific safety plans or program documents like AHAs or JSAs, things like that, that's one of the services that we provide for our clients. So a lot of times, they don't know where to go for all this stuff, and they might be required to have a site-specific safety plan for a project they're about to do, but they don't really know how to write it, So I've written them. Some of them are like 1,200 pages long. I did one recently that has, for a site that has radiation. And so they get pretty complex sometimes, but and we have to like sit there and figure out, how we're going to allow workers to get into these certain areas that are contaminated without them being exposed. We have to think about, talk about decon procedures, how they're going to decontaminate themselves, the equipment, how to prevent cross-contamination. I mean, it gets really in depth. And so sometimes the planning on these, on a lot of the environmental projects, before you ever set foot on the project, just in the planning phases, it could be, months, depending on what type of contaminants are on the job. So, so that's one of the fun things I do when it's raining. I do safety plans, and when it's
better than you than me, man. 1,200 pages. I don't know about all that.
I've been doing it for a while, so I kind of got it figured out. I have a system for it. So,
there you go. Well, Terry, before we get out of here, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, social media, emails, whatever contact websites. Go ahead and plug all that.
Yeah. So my company name is called Yellowknife Consulting Services, and the website is www.yellowknifesafety.com. And you can track me down through the website. We've got a whole bunch of stuff on there. You can check it out. We even have some online training. So if people want to do some OSHA, I think we have the 10 on there. We've got a whole bunch on there. So you can check it out and get training, and you get the certs and everything. It's pretty good. It's a good setup. So
fantastic.
Yeah. So if anybody needs anything, feel free to contact me. I'll talk about safety with anybody. If, it's no problem, because sometimes people just have questions, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great. It was a pleasure talking with you, man. I really appreciate you carving the time out of your day to come on here and educate the listeners.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate it. And I appreciate what you're doing for everybody with the podcast. So thanks a lot.
It's been a lot of fun.
Good. Nice. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gents, that about does it for this week's episode of the podcast. I hope you all learned a little bit more about the importance of safety. And as cliche as it sounds, if you see something, say something. Your voice could actually mean the difference between someone getting hurt and not going home. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there. And until next time, make every weld better than your last.